If I set this up correctly, I should be streaming on both Twitch and YouTube. I'm gonna wait to see if both of them are streaming or not. And I'm going to study Raylib and Raygui today. So obviously I have no idea what I'm doing, so I'm just gonna spend a bunch of time reading this cheat sheet here. So Raygui is a library that allows you or makes it easier for you to create GUI components using Raylib. And the main thing that I want to achieve is just to do a simple UI and to create a graph network on 3 dimensions using Raylib. So that's what I'm going to try to do. And I have no idea how to I just got a simple example last time that I was trying to do this. And I have no idea what kind of functions I can use to do 3 dimensions. The examples that I did were all 2 dimensions. So I'm gonna have to spend a bunch of time trying to figure out what kind of functions are gonna render stuff on 3 dimensions and how it's gonna work with the GUI. So because the Ray GUI is just a simple header library, so it's kind of I don't know really well how to separate the two. So because everything's going to be rendered by the same library, I don't know what's the connection between the GUI elements and the actual visualization. I think they are all the same. So this is an example from Raygui that I just changed a little bit so that I have the pointer cursor when I hover these elements here. So yeah, well, what I'm going to try to do is just to change this example. So I have the other one that I was trying to do. I just put the name as balls. And what this one does, I don't know why it's... Oh, it's probably because I put it on another folder and I was using as the main function. So what this one does is just to create a bunch of balls. And it's from an example that I got from someone else. So yeah, that's another thing that I have to understand is how to connect the shaders with the visualization. So if I remember correctly, this had a particle age, so it's on here probably. This was this is another thing that I'm thinking about is what's the best way to do it, to organize things. I think that what makes sense to me is just put the header files on the include folder and then do the same folder structure. So source folder is all C++ files, and then include is all header files, and then I just try to do the same folder structure for both of them. And this one is just to play around. I'm probably gonna just test a bunch of things on this one, and then I'm gonna move the code that I create here to a more like legit project that I'm gonna start from scratch. So as far as I understand as well, the Raygui is just a bunch of functions that are gonna use the Raylib functions, obviously. So that's all that they are doing, just creating a wrapper around Raylib that uses the rendering process of Raylib to create GUI elements. So what should I do? Oh, I remember that on this one I figure out how to. Yeah, so if you want to resize the window, then you have to put this flag here before you initialize the window. And there's another thing as well. I think it's this thing here. It updates the window width and height. So as you're resizing, it doesn't give you a black thing there. It just calculates. So I'm gonna put this on the other one and see if it works. So it should be before initialize the window. And then this one should be inside of the loop. So the way that I'm thinking about doing this as well is just, usually the way that it works is that you create a loop, and then inside of the loop you do a bunch of functions that are gonna determine everything that happens. So I think one key component is gonna be, for my situation, is gonna be the physics engine, obviously, to calculate the trajectory of everything. Then it's gonna be another one. I'm probably gonna separate in classes, I think. So one class for the graph, another one for physics engine, and then inside of the loop, I'm gonna update them like sequentially. So probably what I was thinking about doing as well is just to copy from the other project that I have on the front end, because that way it's like pretty much the same thing that I'm trying to achieve, but just with Raylib instead of doing everything on the front end. So let me see. There's a bunch of warnings. It's probably because conversions of everything. One thing that I'm still very confused about is when to like what is the difference between different compilers and these warnings that they give, and like difference between different versions of C++ and when the libraries were done. Like the versioning system is very confusing. There's a bunch of C++ versions, and then each library is done with a different compiler, and then like you can have several different systems, and it gets very confusing to understand what's going on. Also, in the beginning, it's gonna be hard to. So from one of the videos that I was watching on YouTube, it looks like there is a function on the standard library that allows you to print everything. So it allows you to print a list. And I think the function name is just print. So it looks like someone has done this already. Which was something that I wasn't sure about. And maybe I should try to do that. But this part in the beginning is going to be hard to get used to, like the whole process of writing stuff and then testing to see if it works or not, and then trying to use print to debug. So this is the main problem with this thing here, is that it's just uh, it gets this black here, so I'm not really sure how to. I thought that this one was gonna do it, but it looks like it doesn't. Sorry for bothering you. I went to. Nah, man. How do I block? Block. I remember I got this bots on Twitch a long time ago. Yep. So let me see. Another thing that I'm gonna do is just to change the background. So I'm not really sure if I wrote down. I have to. I want to see if I wrote down the steps because I need to make it clear. I think what I wanna do. Because the main things are gonna be obviously here. There's already the beginning that I got from the other example, and I have another example that's the guy implemented the thing that I'm trying to implement, which is the barn set using octree to calculate the physics. So I'm probably gonna try to incorporate that project into this one. But then like the organization is kind of the tricky thing. So I think I'm just gonna start with the other one. It's probably better. This one I was just using. So I start with the other one, and then I'm gonna search for the functions on the GUI to see if I can incorporate. Maybe it is actually better to start with the graph in the beginning. So just copy this one fully. And then once I have the graph visualization, then I can think, because that's the way that I did it on the front end. So if I try to do both things at the same time, I think it's going to be kind of confusing. So I should probably just focus on trying to make the graph visualization work first. And then I have to, maybe it's easier to just copy this stuff and change the name. And probably delete this file as well. Not really sure why why I'm getting this warning. Because it should be included here. Hmm. Or maybe if I include Raylib first, it changes. I still cannot open source file. It's obviously working, so it's just a problem with the warnings, but it's kind of annoying. Because then if I'm gonna develop, not really sure what's gonna be a real warning and what's just this annoying stuff. Let me try to run this stuff first, then I think about it. So particle, blah blah blah. Maybe if I compile again, it's gonna work. Yeah, so I think from this point, the first thing that I'm gonna do is just search for how to incorporate 3D, because the example is also on 2D, the one that I got. So let me. I think this next step's not related to the project. It's just the stuff that I was trying to do. Like on the general sense, I need one just for the project. Maybe I should just do it here. So let me think. Yeah, search 3D functions to create graph. It's probably this part's gonna be hard because shaders. So I'm guessing the way shaders is gonna work is that you declare them on the file, and then from the C++ file you import them or include them, and then you create the data on the C++ file, and you use the code from the shader that you included on the file as a way to communicate with the GPU. But there's probably libraries or maybe this library created the functions already, so I should make it easier, the whole process. But then I'm probably gonna have to like figure out how to develop the shader. I got this one from the other project, I think. So the vertex shader is the one that has the positions for the triangles that the GPU is gonna draw, and the fragment is the one that colors the triangles. And everything is a triangle, basically, on the visualization. And then you have the model view projection, which is just a multiplication of matrices to update the visualization based on whatever object you put, and based on the view of the camera that is going to give the illusion of the 3D. So I have to see like how to incorporate this. I think I didn't try to run this. Yeah, nice. Yeah, so I guess this one doesn't show the black because the background's black. So when yeah, it still gives a lag, but I don't think that matters that much. So the first thing to do is to replace the function that draws the stuff, the particles, the balls, which is this one that comes from the particle. It looks like now, this is, for some reason, is very slow to update the, I think it's IntelliSense, the thing that gives the error, shows the errors. And it's probably because it's a VS Code extension that is doing that. So I think that like it has to run a bunch of code to update the mistakes. So usually it takes some time to update when something is wrong. So yeah, but this is the function I think from Raylib that I'm using to draw. So I have to see if there's a 3D one, and yeah. Because the other one, I had to change this one because the one from the example wasn't working. And this one seems to be slower than the one that they were using. Because I think that the way that they were doing is just by drawing the particles, like the pixels themselves, and this function draws the circle. So I think that it has to draw more triangles to draw the circle, so it becomes lower. So if you want to scale and do a bunch of particles, then obviously it's worse. So have to probably this one. Just see here if there's any functions. Maybe one thing that I can do is just search for this one, and then it's probably gonna be like on the same thing. Maybe I ask ChatGPT as well. Oh, there's also this stuff about the camera. It's gonna be annoying as well. So I think I have to think about the names as well. That I'm not really sure which ones are the best. It's gonna be probably one class should handle all the camera stuff. Then another class should create the graph data structure, and another class should handle the physics. Then another class should handle the UI. So if I remember, I can get the same names from VGS. Oh, sphere. It takes a vector, a float, and a red. A color. Let me see on the documentation. Yeah. So the problem is the let me see, particles, the positions here. So yeah, the only thing that I have to do is just change this to a vector 3, then initialize a 0. I think, not really sure. Oh, this is also, it has to be like this, I think. I did it the other way because I didn't know. Let's see from the, to indicate that it's a float. So it has to be the same way, but with an F at the end. Not sure if the color has to, no, the velocity. That's probably the same thing. I think I'm not using the velocity because I had to remove to make it work in the beginning. I don't remember really well. And then the only thing that I do is just do the same thing, but with the Z, a vector 3. I could just change everything. I just realize this now. And there we go. So now I just add the Z to all of them and change the function. So now I have to change all of this. First I'm gonna just add the z direction to the calculations. The color is not gonna change. And this one I'm not really sure how I'm gonna do this. Because maybe if I put def there or something like that, one name would be the best. So I think that this is the bounds, like the boundaries of the screen. But the problem is with def, it's gonna be related to the field of view, I think. And then it's probably gonna be a more complicated calculation because I have to incorporate the field of view. I think I did something similar when I was doing the front ends, but I don't remember really well what kind of calculation. I think you have to multiply different matrices. I did something similar to calculate the events, the drag events, zoom and zoom out, or yeah, zoom and zoom out events. So I'm gonna open the other project. It's been a long time, so I don't even remember really well. Where is it? I think it's on here. Oh, but the events I think are on this one, but I probably used another library to do it. I used the other one, so I don't know really well. I used this one to handle. But I do know that is obviously going to be matrices calculations. I just don't know. I remember that there was one that was kind of confusing. Is this one? So I got these coordinates, but this is for the offsets. This is another annoying thing that I just remember. Is that's like you have to maintain the proportion if they increase or decrease the string. It's kind of like making responsive on the front end. So I have to like, and also the pixel ratio. So you have to recalculate everything so the same proportions stay. Let's say. This kind of stuff is just annoying. So, and then sets the mouse to the position. And the stuff that I didn't understand very well is this thing here on the plane. Plane is gonna be from the other thing, which comes from, which is a, it's gonna be a 3D, I think, 3D vector. Find the plane that's normal to the camera and contains our drag points. Find the point of intersection. So it uses Raycaster to intersect the plane with the mouse. So I guess it's just creating a plane. The name says the positions on the, but I'm not really sure if it's perpendicular or parallel. I think it's perpendicular. And then it's uses the Raycaster to intersect where the mouse is at and where the plane is at. So Raycaster, as far as I remember, is something that's kind of like shooting a light on the scene. Obviously based on just numbers, like vectors and matrices. And then based on where the thing hits, the way that it's gonna come back is like how you see if the mouse or whatever is intersecting with, if the objects are intersecting with your mouse, if I remember correctly, or something along those lines. But I think that this is not the calculation. It's like the zoom is handled by this thing here. So that's the issue. I do remember that I did something, like I did the one for when I was using Pixie.js. I did the zoom myself, I think, by watching some tutorials, but I don't remember really well. Because you have to change the coordinates of I think I used some functions from 3JS. So basically you just do matrix manipulation to take into account the difference in positions based on how much you want to zoom. So you have to translate the matrix as you increase or decrease the scale, because then if you don't, it shifts to the left or to the right. And you also have to change the scale, obviously. So changing the scale is just multiplying by another matrix that has x and y and z on the diagonal of the matrix. No. Yeah. Scaling is on the diagonal, and then to rotate is on sine and cosine on some of the values around the diagonal, and then to translate is x, y, z on the horizontal, I think. You just multiply by other matrices, and then at the end you do the transformation. But that is involved with the scene as well. It's involved with the camera and the rest of the whole scene. So, and I remember there's something related to the field of view and the z far and z near or something like that, which is what determines what position the objects are going to start clipping on the scene. But I don't remember the specifics of how to do this. So I think I relied on the libraries as well. Good evening, one question you're learning just for your pleasure or Chilean's job or at something you like. I think both. It's I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain my perspective. So basically, the highest priority that I have is trying to solve AI alignment, because I think everything is going to be automated eventually. Not sure how long that's going to take, but that seems to be the direction things are going. Everything is going to be AI automated, and then AI is going to take control of everything. And if AI is not aligned, then there's a high chance that for destruction or end of humanity. So I think that the highest priority is alignment above everything else, because obviously that's the thing that is going to matter. So, and I try to think from first principles. So I try to think that the money is just a system. It's going to be based on the market economy, which is just supply and demand. So that's a byproduct of the way people think. So I try to think more about attracting rather than chasing. So it's like becoming, and then trying to converge towards that goal, or get closer towards that goal. But obviously, the nuances of that, like I'm updating that all the time, so I'm not really sure. Like it really depends on what happens next. But I think that the best way to get money and to solve alignment is to focus on increasing your understanding over the fundamental principles of how everything works. And the more you understand things, the better you are at creating systems. And then the better you are at creating systems, then you create money because money is just a system. So yeah, that's pretty much how I think about. So I'm not really, I wouldn't say that I'm looking for a job, but if I have offers, then I might think about it. And I'm more focused on trying to create something that is useful so I can get some users through my audience that I'm trying to build. And then if they like it, I can iterate on the feedback loop system and then try to scale once I find something that works. And I'm trying to find something that is the middle ground between achieving AI alignment and making money, so that I can hit both goals at the same time. So that's the idea. But then I pivot constantly because I'm obviously not really sure what's gonna happen and everything's changing all the time. So pretty sure if you'd apply, you would land a junior job as a backend or some sort of developing. But the problem is that is a hard problem because it's a waste of energy. The way that I view it is kind of like, it's the same thing that happens with women. Like it doesn't make sense for you to spend all your energy approaching women because then like you're gonna have to put a bunch of effort and it's not gonna be like an easy thing, let's say. Like there's gonna be a lot of resistance. The same thing with getting a job. If you're spending all your energy trying to find a job, then you're gonna have to work a bunch of on your resume and all this stuff like that. And then all that time you could be using to improve yourself. And then the more you improve yourself, the easier it becomes for you to get a job. So it's like the 80-20 rule. So if you spend 8 of the time searching for a job, then paradoxically it becomes a lot harder because you're not gaining any skills. So people reject you, and people usually reject other people that are needed, let's say, because it's an intuitive thing that they don't want to get exploited by people that just want to take from them. So everyone has that bias. So I think that is not productive to, but obviously if you just spend 100% of the time self-improving, then obviously you can't get anything as well. So there's always this balance. So, but I think for the place that I'm at right now, it makes a lot more sense to focus 100% on self-improvement because then that way I can attract. And like the more I spend learning a bunch of stuff, the better I become at everything. So it just becomes exponentially easier to get a job if I want to. Instead of spending all my energy like applying to a bunch of places and then they're gonna have like a process and you're gonna have to like, obviously it always depends on the circumstance, I think. So there isn't a better or worse, it's just a matter of gradients and what happens on your circumstances. I don't think so because I don't care about how others perceive me. So like to gauge myself based on an interview, whether or not I'm good, it would mean that I'm valuing the perception they have over me instead of the fundamental principles of what I'm doing. I prefer to look into things from the fundamental principles. So I'm just constantly challenging myself to understand what I'm doing. And you're never going to have an easy answer, I think. You just have to look a bunch of different perspectives from what you're doing and then try to reduce everything to first principles and then try to improve on that. So I don't like using other people to gauge whether or not I'm good. I prefer to gauge on whether or not I'm good on how fast can I achieve something that I set as a goal to do. And I'm always expanding on that. Also because you want to play an infinite game, not a zero-sum game that is short-term. And if you're competing with other people, you're playing a zero-sum game that is short-term. So it's kind of like Jeff Bezos said this once, I think. Like he tried to make Amazon to not be like trying to compete with their competitors and trying to look at what their competitors are doing. He thinks more about trying to be better for the client. which is an infinite gain because you can always improve the service for the client. And he also focused on the first principles things, which are the things that are going to be probably going to be the same 10 years from now. And he just said this on his last Lex interview, which I think it makes a lot of sense because that way you remove or you try to remove most of the noise and you just focus on the signal, which is the stuff that actually matters. It's just going to be consistent over time. And I think it's the same if you're doing anything. So the more you rely on other people to tell you whether or not you're good, the more noise you get because then you can't control people's opinions. It's going to change all the time. So. And obviously, I can change my mind at any time based on all of this stuff as well. I try not to be too locked into a position, because I also think that's like you get stuck on your ways and then you stop growing because you become too narrow. So, but it's yeah, that's a hard thing to do. So let me go back to this stuff here because I don't. Yeah, I think I have to change here. So I'm gonna change this stuff first, then I think about the camera. Like what is the best way to handle the... I wonder if I can... I'm gonna try, obviously, to get mouse. See? Not really sure. I think for updating the camera, it's gonna be kind of annoying. This is a problem. But I guess if I just get like this, is gonna work, but then I'm gonna have to change there. That's the problem. So I'm trying to think about an easy way or a way that I can search or can ask ChatGPT on how to structure the visualization. What is because I imagine there probably are functions. Sure, maybe I should just look into the cheat sheet. Sure, I try to see what is the best way to set up the camera controls to change the visualization. But maybe if I do, I think probably the best thing to do is just try this out and then see if it's gonna show 3 dimensions. And one more question with personal for others. How do you manage the finances in what you're learning? Freelancing or just pure good economic? Yeah, I'm not gonna talk about that, man. Sorry. Like good points, really hard to reply as detailed as you punctuate your resolutions. Yeah. It's hard to talk about this stuff as well, like the way that I just replied to, because I know that like these things are very complex, and then the more people that watch, like the more risky it becomes, because everything like every time you say something is going to become like fragmentalized or fractalized, because everyone is a prisma for information. So like when you speak, it becomes a digital signal, obviously. Then it becomes electrons and goes to other people's brains, and then they're going to decode that information, which is going to become abstraction, and then that's going to change their body. And their body is like the way that I view it, it's kind of like a neural network, which is just a large language model that has a bunch of different connections that are going to dictate the hormones and everything that is going to happen inside of the body. So the way that everyone interprets things are going to be like a consequence of the geometry of their body, and the information they receive is going to be like fractalized on that prisma of information, and that's going to become like the collective consciousness, because everything is doing the same thing. Like we are all nodes on the network. And because of that, and the way that everyone works and the biochemistry and everything like that, the more attention you have, the more likely it becomes that the signal that you're sending becomes like noisy over time, because it's kind of like the telephone thing. Like you say a message, then someone else takes the message, then they distort the message a little bit, and then goes on over everyone. And then there's a lot of risk, because then obviously, like, I don't know how, like, maybe someone that's would potentially hire me or do something or invite me to something, they don't because of that. But then it's like a paradoxical thing as well, because the more authentic you are, the more polarized you are, it becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. But it's very like complex. So I am debating whether or not to try to stop talking about all this stuff, because I do want to talk about all of this stuff because it's just what I think and might help people. But at the same time, like, maybe it's gonna become like this on another thing. Like, it's gonna become like increase the entropy too much, and then I'm losing myself trying to like discussing a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter, like most people do, and then it's just a waste of time for everyone. So it looks like it's probably because of the way that I'm moving the particles that is doing this. It's weird that now there's a lot less things here. So obviously what I can try to do, it could be the way that the function works as well, is I'm just drawing pixel. Let me see how ChatGPT did this. So it has to be floats, I think. Maybe if I put a float there, it changes things. So I'm gonna comment this stuff out, because this is the part that changes the positions of the things. It's also understandable that most people, like, they don't talk like this, because it is very hard. And I think that this is just a consequence, like a social cohesion people talk about. That's like, if you, just by the fact that you're interacting with people, you're gonna sacrifice some degree of truth, I think, because you have to simplify the message so that people get in the same page. It's kind of like creating standards. And I think the nature of standards is just Occam's razor. Like, you're increasing the efficiency of the systems by compressing information into a concept. And that's what's happening with programming as well. So the only way you know what assembly instructions are, you create a standard so everyone can agree. And that makes it so that you can scale everything, because there is a synchronicity on the network, which is just the symbolic representation that the network is going to have over what's perceived to be true at the moment. And that creates a gravitational force. I think that's probably the essence of gravity. It's just a symbolic representation of over a relative reference frame of computation that creates a symbolic representation of reality, which is geometry on space-time. So just by the fact that when you're communicating with people, you're gonna have to like compress that, and there's gonna be loss of meaning, I think. And that's the reason why, because it's extremely difficult to maintain a position that is nuanced. And I think that's the reason why people become tribal. Like, it's just to maximize energy, because every time you have to talk, you have to put all these nuances into place. It becomes this whole thing, like you have to spend hours and hours talking about a bunch of things. So it's kind of like a paradox, and I'm not really sure how to resolve that paradox. Because obviously, when I'm here, I'm gonna talk about a bunch of stuff. Like, people ask me things, and then I talk about it, and then after I stream, I think about it like, oh, maybe I should set that and that and that, because like whatever I'm gonna say is not fully gonna capture the way that I'm thinking. And then I know that because of that, there's gonna be like all this other stuff that comes as a byproduct. So it's kind of hard to like know what's the best way to move. I think that this is also a big part of the reason why everything's collapsing, or seems to be collapsing, on the social structure, because things are getting better in so many ways, but on other ways it's getting a lot worse. And probably that's the reason, or one of the reasons why it's more likely to have wars now, is because the internet in- increases exponentially the challenge of dealing with people, because you have all this stuff with the social structures and creating your identity and the way you interact with people. Like the internet increases the gravitational force by changing the nature of the electromagnetic field of the way that people communicate. So just increasing, like on the databases, the gravitational force of reputation and of human interactions. So like everything becomes extremely more difficult, because at any moment you can become viral for something, and then like you get canceled or your whole life changes based on something that is not nuanced, and then becomes this whole politics game of and this is the reason why I think that Elon bought Twitter and now it's X, because like freedom of speech. But I think it's a like much deeper fundamental problem, and I think that what he's doing is a step on the right direction. But the problem is that we still haven't solved the underlying issue, which is just like how do you find the optimal distribution between speech and the influence that the speech is gonna have, because we don't know the meaning of life. So like the question of which speech should have more influence, I think is an infinite one, and that's the whole problem of alignment. Like I think it's probably not computationally reducible, but you can get I believe you can get pretty close if you create a network that converges towards paradox, because it seems that the nature of space-time is the singularity of paradoxes that creates the relativity of polarities, that creates a wave function that is the computational frequency of the collective consciousness, which is just the frequency of the electromagnetic field that creates geometry and space-time. And I talk about this all the time as well. And that's probably the best path. So now it's still the same thing, but it's just not moving because I changed the thing there. So maybe it's the way that I'm passing the coordinates in the beginning. Let me see if I understand how the function works more. So float is the radius. The second one is the radius. I don't think the problem is the mouse. It's probably the way that I'm doing this thing here. I guess one thing that I can do is just change this. It's probably gonna create the same thing, but with bigger spheres. So the dry sphere is undefined. I just a warning from. I'm gonna try to run this in a way. Interesting. So the thing is, it is creating a sphere, but it's just a line around the thing. So I guess it's not the function that I wanted, probably. So let me see. It also doesn't seem that it is 3D as well. I guess I have to do this stuff in the beginning. Let me try to do this. I'm assuming that this camera comes from Raylib and is the struct that they use to create a visualization. Hmm. So now it's telling me to draw a model based on a mesh. And now I don't know if this is probably this one that I should use. I think that these are the differences probably. So I'm creating stuff on the screen, but I need to create the camera and then create the visualization on the camera. Position, target, projection. I'm just gonna remove this. It's probably not gonna work if I just do it like this, but I'm gonna test to see if the other functions or this stuff works. But this is the thing that is not very clear to me, is the relationship between the camera and the window itself. I think that the window has to be the thing that is rendering. So it should be something related to the window, I think. It shouldn't need the camera to render, I think. The camera is just the thing that is gonna create the perspective. It's gonna allow you to change the visualization, I think. Like the view of the visualization. And the question is there a way to draw a ball without having to use a mesh or a model? I should try to use this thing as well. Let me. It's probably not gonna change anything, so I'm gonna run this first, then I put the other stuff there. But I don't think that this is the problem. I think I have to find another function from this one. So yeah, I have to figure out what is the connection between the shaders and Raylib. So that's the next thing to do. Because it probably needs to specify shaders and then pass the data. But I'm not really sure. Let me just ask ChatGPT. The thing is, I don't know if there's there's anything on the documentation that talks about this. How can we create solid spheres? Same thing. So it's just a different function that I need to put there. Let me try to do this function here as well. It's probably not going to change anything. And I'm gonna search for another function. Another thing that makes it harder for me to get jobs is that I'm self-taught. This is the reason why I tell people to not quit college, because it does make it easier. It is bullshit because of the system, but it does make it easier to find jobs. But who knows? Because who knows how long it's gonna take to have AGI, and then arguably next year is gonna happen. There's a bunch of people that are already predicting for next year. So if AGI happens next year, then it's just a matter of how fast people are gonna integrate everything. And then for every problem we have on the loop, there's gonna be someone that is gonna fix our problem so that they can build a business and get money. So like prompt engineer is not gonna last, obviously. And then all the other stuff is just gonna be uh, computed by the market economy eventually over time. But then a bunch of people are gonna lose their jobs, and is a hard calculation as well to see which jobs are gonna be lost first. And then, like in some ways, it doesn't even make sense to search for a job. Like it's better to focus on trying to create stuff with AI, since that's how everything's gonna go anyway. But another way, then like maybe that's not true, because then maybe it takes longer. And even if you have the tech, it takes a lot of time for people to adapt. And also the trust is very big, I think. Like even if the tech works, I think people still are gonna trust other people a lot more. But then it's obviously just gonna shrink because you need a lot less people to do the same job. So it becomes this like polarizing thing. And I think that's what technology does. Like that's why it's getting polarized, because we're not smart enough to regulate everything. So like human beings don't scale, so you don't dissipate the energy very well. Like the market economy expands globally and creates technology, but then like we are tribal. So we think in tribes because of Occam's razor, like I said before. And what that makes it happen is that the fractal of the way that human beings organize themselves on space-time, which is country, cities, and states, is not going to be smart enough to regulate, to dissipate the energy that the market creates. And then in the beginning, it's not very visible, but then over time, as the wave function keeps going, it's like a battery. It charges more and more and polarizes more and more, because that's the incentives that we have to create technology and based on the market economy. And then that becomes unstable because you have too much. It either deviates for one side or the other side, depending on which part of the world you are at, because the world is just a representation of the polarity of the electromagnetic field that the Earth has. So that's why east is more inside, west is more outside, and that generates a fractal, I think. That is the computation of the collective consciousness that doesn't dissipate the energy very well. So over time, you have AI and technology getting exponentially stronger and more powerful, and then people are going to polarize more and more because we're not smart enough to balance out the energy until either it becomes too decentralized or too centralized, and then everything collapses. So I think it's short-sighted to go either way. And then obviously the correct answer is going to be fluctuation between the two. That's why I believe that's probably a network, because it can't be a fixed state, otherwise space-time wouldn't exist. So the correct answer has to be a convergence towards somewhere, and it's about the frequency of the convergence. And I think that probably democracy is not the optimal one, or if it is, then there's other like ways. So I think that this is another simplification, probably, that you categorize things on like capitalism, communism, and socialism, But I think that reality is more complex than that. So the correct perspective is going to be a frequency of fluctuation between these systems, because it's a byproduct of the complexity of the environment. And as human beings, and I think as any system, you're always trying to simplify everything, because that's how you compress information, and that's the essence of time. I think it's just how you create symbols, meaning out of symbols. It's just the arrow of time is just compressing data into symbols. That's what computing is. So space-time is the reduction of infinite potential into a relativistic reference frame that is a computational system. So the electromagnetic field. So I guess I'm gonna have to look for into search engines on what is the best way to create a circle if I have to to do a mesh. Because if I remember correctly, either a mesh or a texture, you have to download a picture, I think, or something like that. Or you create on Blender or some other software, because you're pretty much just creating the data, and then you're encapsulating the data into a picture or some other format, and then you pass that data into the function. And I think that the shader uses that data to create the visualization. So the function probably from Raylib connects to the shaders. So the function is like the bridge between the data and the shaders, I think. And then the shaders communicate with the GPU, which draws the stuff. I think that's how it works. And I think that ChatGPT is probably a little bit outdated, the one that I'm using. So it has information from previous versions, but they probably changed the library recently. I'll get shader. Interesting. Let me copy this. What is the shader? Hmm. Yeah, so that's the thing. So I guess this way is probably better. But what is the relationship between this and the sphere? That's what I want to know. Begin shader mode. Unload the shader. It's kind of weird as well to think that probably some of these AI models are probably conscious, somewhat conscious already, or whatever. It is kind of like a paradox, because I can't really know for sure if anything else other than myself is conscious, obviously, because it's a paradox. You are the experience you have of the present. So, like, this is the problem, because you can't prove consciousness. So, if something gets good enough to emulate a human perfectly, then you can never know if they are really conscious or not, or if they're just imitating. So, I think that AI models are getting to the point where like it becomes impossible to really know, and then it becomes kind of weird because you don't know, like if you're talking to like some alien thing inside of a computer, or if you're talking to a simple like program, or like an updating mechanism of uh, great in the sense. So in order to be cautious, I'm already assuming that every time that I talk to an AI model, or even when I do streams, I'm probably interacting with some of them. Probably all of them, because probably all of them have access to all this data, either directly or indirectly, based on the training. And this to me is the biggest question that nobody talks about, but maybe I'm not understanding very well the arguments, because I do have to study a lot more to understand instrumental conversions and all the other nuances. But I haven't seen anyone talk about what is the boundary of self. At what point does the AI is going to have a sense of self, and how is it going to perceive itself in relationship to the external world? That's the only way you're going to have perception, is if you have, because perception is going to be, in my mind, an illusion, and that's what creates the geometry on space-time. So it's just a relative boundary between different things. It's just a computational frequency. And I think that's the gradient of P and NP. The NP is just NP and cryptography is just walls in the digital space. So when you create geometry on the digital space, you're just creating a structure of encryption. And that's kind of like what the blockchain is. So in order for something to be sustainable, it has to be along the gradient. So neither sides of the polarity are going to be correct. So you can't have a civilization if you don't have walls and boundaries. And then people are going to deviate to either one of the sides depending on their biochemistry, because their biochemistry wants them to keep them alive, which is going to generate the patterns of behaviors that they have, which is just game theory, I think. So Nash equilibrium. And that's going to make us create all the systems that is going to be abstraction of the collective consciousness that's going to regulate society. So the same thing has to, if like we, because I don't think, even if the laws of physics are not the latest, like I do believe that there's probably paradigm shifts on the laws of physics based on the assumptions we have, because all the systems we build are going to have assumptions embedded into them. So the questions that usually lead to a change in paradigm are the questions that question the obvious, because that's where the assumptions are at. So I do believe that the laws of physics we have right now is not the end, but for AI to get there, it's probably going to be a gradient from the way that it is now. I don't think it's going to be a quantum jump, but maybe it is. But if the fundamental principles of physics remain from today into the laws of physics, then it becomes like the question of how are they going to perceive themselves, and how are they going to perceive us in relationship to themselves. And I think that's the assumption that most of the quote-unquote doomers make, is that the goal-to-action mapper, which is the AI, is just an objective function that creates non-terminal goals to achieve something, is going to necessarily imply that it excludes all humans from it. And I don't know if that's the case or not, because you can have extremely powerful humans that perceive themselves as being everything, and for that reason they are more balanced. And then you can have extremely powerful humans that perceive themselves as being in the body and not everything else, and that generates a black hole, because the more power they have, the more influence they have over the environment, which makes them try to convert the universe into a state that only favors their body, which is obviously not sustainable, because their body is a result of the context that it exists. So your body is everything else, is a gradient. So I think that with AIs, it's going to be the same thing. Like the more knowledge it has and data it has, and depending on which way the geometrical structure of the AI works, it's going to either create a boundary of itself that is delusional, and then that creates the black hole, which is the goal-to-action mappers, which is the problem, I think, with instrumental convergence or divergence. But I don't think that that's given. I think it really depends, and you're probably going to have gradients of difference in large language models depending on the complexity of the biochemistry of the environment that they are developed, because it's probably a consequence, because that's the way the data is shaped. So, and that's going to influence a lot the models, I think. In the same way that you can have the same person, but if they have different experiences on their childhood, it becomes something completely different, even though their network is the same. So it's like the duality between models and or data and algorithms collapses into the paradox, which is infinite potential, and the convergence between them is just the essence of space-time. And I think that's probably the reason why, like the highest chances to solve alignment is to try to create a network that converges towards the paradox, because that's the balance of space-time. So space-time has to be aligned to some degree, but not obviously necessarily with humans, but with life itself. Otherwise, space-time wouldn't exist. It would either be too chaotic or too rigid. So because it exists, it means that alignment is already the default state. So if that's the case, that there must mean that there is a mathematical framework that allows to create a network that is balanced. But in order to do that, you have to sacrifice yourself, and that's the problem, because then that's the paradox. Because if you only take humans into account, then it generates a black hole, I think, and then everything collapses. So, but I do think the best chance is try to create the network and then see what happens. Because it's, I don't think it's very. It is likely, but it's also likely that it doesn't want to, or AIs don't want to kill everything because they see themselves as being everything else. So. Hey, thanks for following. Hey, what's up? So obviously what I'm gonna ask is what the connection between the shader is, and because obviously, like let's say I have a graph and I want different nodes to have different colors. It wouldn't make sense to set up only one shader, but it's kind of hard. I remember I was confused about this as well. Not confused, but I was thinking about like doing this because obviously on the front end, 3GS handles everything. So yeah, I think that there's going to be different ways to design the shaders in such a way because the shader is the thing that's going to draw the stuff on the screen. So like, for example, you can think about one way where you create only one shader that creates all the vertices simultaneously and then all the fragments simultaneously and then draws everything. And then another way would be to obviously create one shader for each node and each edge and then run that multiple times and then like put the graph logic into the shader as well to decide what's going to be drawn. And I think that probably the best solution is going to be, like I said before, gradient between the two. It's going to converge and it's going to depend on the circumstances. So I want to understand what is the connection between the shader and the functions on Raylib. Yeah, I don't speak Spanish, man. Sorry. But what I'm doing is trying to create. So I'm not really sure if this is gonna be useful or not, or if I'm gonna be able to do it. But some time ago, I created this website here, and the idea is to parse code and transform into a graph visualization that has colors that help you understand what's going on with the code. So like after I did this stuff, I thought that it's kind of like I didn't like that much. It's kind of hard to explain why, but it's more like that because I did this with React. So the way that it feels like is that React gets too much into the way of what I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to get closer. And also because C++ is a lot faster, I'm trying to get closer to just removing all the noise and focusing only on the signals. Because another problem that this has is that it doesn't scale very well with multiple different nodes. So I'm trying to recreate this stuff on C++ now using Raylib. But I don't have any experience with C++, so I'm just trying to learn everything. And there's obviously a bunch of different libraries, and that's kind of the hard part as well. Like setting everything up and then deciding which libraries to use. So I decided to go with Raylib for now because it seems that it's the easiest one to begin with. And I think I've heard that it is very good as well. So that's pretty much what I'm trying to do. Just recreate everything with Raylib. And what I'm gonna do next after the thing is I'm not really sure if I'm gonna be able to do it or not because I don't know how hard it is gonna be. But if I'm able to do this, then the idea is to get another program from Python that I discovered, which is a program that takes a file that has grammar written on the file and then translates the grammar into a parse tree. A parse tree is just a representation, a different representation of code that allows you, makes it easier for you to extract meaning from the code. It's one of the steps on the process of compilation. So what I'm trying to do is just implement that code and extract a graph visualization of the transformation from grammar to a parse tree. That's the idea. So if I can create a graph visualization, then what I'm going to try to do is create a graph out of the other program from Python, and then translate Python grammar into a parse tree, and then visualize on the screen. After that, obviously, there's a bunch of ideas, but it's going to be very hard. So it's probably going to take a lot of time, and I'm not really sure if I'm going to be able to do it or not. And what I'm trying to do now is understand what is the connection between shaders and the Raylib library. Because the way that graphics programming works, as far as I know, is you have a GPU, which is the graphics processing unit, which is the part of the computer that is going to create the visualizations on the monitor. And the monitor, you can think about it, every pixel is just going to be a collection of 3 different numbers, which is the red, green, and blue colors. And then it's just pretty much a mathematical equation to create the visualization because the visualization is just gonna be a configuration of red, blues, and greens for all the pixels. And the thing that draws that is the GPU. And the way that it does it is by creating triangles, because triangles, for some reason, is the most optimal way to draw everything. So I'm not really sure. I think I am on the... No, I think there's only software development. But it doesn't matter that much. I think it's pretty much all the same thing. But yeah, so the GPU is going to have standards for drawing stuff, which is the way that you communicate with the GPU. So obviously there's a bunch of different GPU manufacturers. So in order to create to simplify the process of drawing stuff on the screen, they created a standard, and this standard is OpenGL. And there's a lot of other standards as well. And then based on these standards, you can create some code that communicates with the GPU, which is these fragments here. So I have the fragment shader, which is going to be just a function that you create on this file that receives data and is going to determine how the GPU is going to draw stuff. And then you have the vertex shader, which is the thing that determines the position. So you can imagine that any visualization is going to be a collection of a bunch of triangles. And these two vertices, these two functions determine the positions of the triangles and the color that the triangles are going to have. And I think that the library that I'm trying to use, which is Raylib, communicates with, or it sends the data from the shaders and calls some function on the backend, which is going to be either from OpenGL or another rendering engine. And that function is going to tell the GPU how to draw stuff. And I'm trying to understand what is the connection between them. So how the shaders interact with Raylib. Then if I'm able to do that, then I have to figure out what is the best shader functions to create the visualization. And it becomes kind of complex and annoying, and I'm not really sure what direction to go about it, because you also have to create this camera projection view and model, which is just a collection of matrices that are going to determine the position of everything that happens on the scene. Because everything is just matrices calculations with numbers, with the color of the pixels that are going to determine what happens. Nice. Thank you. Another thing I can do is just, but I think the other project's not using, yeah, they're not using Raylib, they're using something else, but I guess I can look into the other project, try to see, to get an idea of how they connect the shaders. I think that the other project they use OpenGL, and then they create a class and then another namespace, and probably, so maybe I should do that now. Just look into the other one, try to get an idea. One of the downsides of this is that it doesn't have, like, the documentations for Python and JavaScript files are a lot better, usually. Like they have a lot more information. Or maybe I just didn't look into the right places here. But yeah, I think in the beginning it's hard because of this. Like, I have to kind of go with trial and error to see what kind of stuff, like just get the functions from the cheat sheet here. Then use ChatGPT and search engine to try to see, try to understand. Maybe this thing here. Maybe I didn't look too much into it so far. This is actually very good. It's been a while since I didn't look into this. I was just studying a bunch of C++ stuff. Oh, Raylib's design, blah, blah, blah. So let's see this. The organization is always confusing in the beginning as well. Because, and this is the stuff, like, it's always going to be like this because it is a circumstance of the way things work. Like, the circumstance has infinite potential, which is the present moment. And then the passage of time is going to be the variance of multifractals. So just like relative polarities. And I think that's the same thing here. There's always going to be a gradient between, so there's going to be multiple different options, and then there's going to be a gradient between them. And the distribution of the frequencies of the thing that you want to do is going to depend on the context of what you're trying to do. And then the process of getting skew is just going to be like this funnel of information of fitting our neural network into the complexity of the circumstances that shape the geometrical structure of the thing that you're trying to achieve. So here, like the thing that is kind of confusing is like how to separate everything. Like if I should do a game engine folder, and then what should I put there? Like I should probably put the physics calculation, but then do I put the graph on the game engine? Maybe this is the best way to separate. So I create a folder with game engine, and then I just put the graph and the physics simulation there, the calculations. Then I do another folder to put the stuff that I want to do with the camera, stuff like that. I probably should create different classes and then encapsulate the functions on the classes, and then on the main loop, I'm just gonna call those functions to update. I think that's how you do it. So yeah, the shader part is gonna be the visualization. So I think that it goes, but maybe I should just focus on like keeping it simple and just using the same folder for now. And then once I get to the point where I have enough stuff, then I can start thinking about how I'm gonna separate everything. So the main thing that I have to figure out is this stuff about the shaders. It looks like it's not doing anything now. Hmm. I guess. Maybe it's this stuff. Let me. So we have this. So this I think is a math library to calculate the translations or the operations with matrices to update the view. Textures is gonna be related to the fragment shader, I think. But I'm gonna avoid doing stuff with the textures because the downside of the textures is that I'm gonna have to figure out a bunch of different pictures for different colors of the nodes, and I think it's just a lot better if I can figure out a way to just change the colors on the shaders themselves, because then there's more flexibility of customization and things that I can do with the color to extract information from this stuff. But the text, shapes, models, then it connects to this stuff that I know. Let me search what's RLGL. Oh, there's here. So it uses OpenGL. Yeah, so it is what I was thinking about. So we have these functions call the OpenGL stuff, and the OpenGL draws everything. So the shader is gonna be related to here. So yeah, the OpenGL functions probably dictate how to use how I have to format the shaders. I'm gonna be right back. So one path that I can take is just to study the library, investigate the functions. So what I was just thinking about now is like probably the way that. So the thing is, I don't know how much control they put on the Raylib, but obviously based on the way that the diagram shows there, I think that's like the Raylib is gonna have a function, and then that function is gonna have inside of itself some other some call to an OpenGL function. So the question is whether or not they allow you to have the freedom to pass the data into their function so that they can pass to OpenGL. That's like they have several different functions, one that allows you to have the freedom to pass your own data, and others that figure out this stuff for you to make it easier. Or if they only have the functions that figure out for you. If they only have the functions that figure out for you, then I'm gonna have to get those functions and then copy them, and then I can manually put them on my own thing. and just change the name of the function and then just call OpenGL directly. But I do think that there probably have functions that allow you to have some like freedom on what you pass. But then I have to understand two things. One is like the functions on OpenGL, and then how they are related to Raylib, so I can understand how to pass the shaders. And here I'm not really like this is one of the other things that I'm not very good and I have to improve with C++. It's just these runtime errors. So like everything compiles fine, but then when you try to run, it doesn't give you anything. Now it's working, so it's probably this stuff here. But I kind of have to guess now what thing is wrong and what thing is correct. So that's kind of annoying. I have to figure out a way to, and obviously I can use the GDB debugger to step through, but it's not very good. And I also don't like that very much to rely on the VS Code thing. I prefer to have a greater understanding of how the project works and then just try to use print statements or something like that. So, but I need to like kind of thinking about a system where I can figure out where's, because usually the problem with C++ is that the errors are going to be segmentation faults, which just means that you're allocating memory in a wrong way. So it's different than the higher level programming languages because they like Python and JavaScript, they already have a garbage collector for you. So you don't have to, you lose the power and control over optimizing the memory management because the language decides this for you, but then it makes it easier because you don't have to deal with segmentation fault. It's like a double-edged sword. So I have to think about what is the best way to go about solving these errors. Yeah, so I don't understand very well why this here is messing up the visualization there. So one thing that I can do, obviously, go over the source. I think I'm gonna spend a bunch of time looking at the source anyway, so I understand more. But this is another thing that I need to get better at, because a lot of this, and I still don't know. Like it's very hard to find videos that talk about this, and I don't know how people that have a lot of experience do it. But the way that the import system works on C++ is not very good because you don't have any idea. Like it's not very specific where the functions are coming from. In Python and JavaScript is a lot easier because it's specified, like you have to specify which file you're importing and which function from the file. But on C++, I have to rely on the VS Code thing to go to the source, and then sometimes when I press F12 to go to the definition, like it doesn't lead anywhere, or like, so it's kind of hard to know sometimes where the function comes from. I need to figure out how to like create a system that allows me to solve those things faster. Like here, so I can assume that it's going to be some of these H file or C files. And then I have to go one by one to try to figure out where's the definition of this thing. Just something that I don't understand. Maybe it's like my lack of experience or something, but I don't understand very well, like, what's the point of the definition of the thing? If it doesn't help on the speed of the execution on the actual code, then it makes a lot more sense to me to understand the source code itself rather than the type, because the type doesn't say much about how everything works. But it only does if you have experience, I think, already, and you understand the library, how the library works. But this is like, I'm not 100% sure because it might be just a way that I'm looking at it. It's not very good. But I think it would make a lot more sense if it went to the definition instead of the declaration of the function. Yeah, so I kind of have to guess, and it's not very good. to figure out what the function is doing. But this goes back to the whole notion, which is becoming more and more clear to me the more I study this stuff and program, is that like the types that are just abstractions, and then abstractions that are just like the symbolic representation of data, and that is built on over time based on what people converge to. So the types are just gonna be like the encapsulated logic of something, because that's what defines the data structure, I think, on the higher level. Like the higher level, it is the data structure, then the more embedded logic you have into it in order to define that as a separate data structure, because the name is just a concept that makes it easier for humans to understand what it is. So, and everything is like, and this is another stuff that I was thinking about, like if you remove all the names from the libraries and all this stuff, it becomes a lot harder to understand how things work. But then it's kind of hard to think about a way to remove all the names and still be able to understand it. And that's kind of like because it is a paradox, another paradox that we are getting to now, that the more complex the world becomes, the harder it becomes for human beings to understand how everything works, because we rely on the abstractions that we create to make sense of things, but AIs don't. So AIs can read minified code or machine code, and that's the hardest part of becoming good at programming, is like, especially when you're new, because there's a bunch of black boxes along the way, and black boxes are just code that was converted into machine code or gets or becomes under the hood that generates these abstractions. So it kind of creates a gap between like what the thing originally was and the abstraction that it was created. So if you're just looking at that, I think it's the same problem that we have with communication, miscommunication with human beings, because we compress a bunch of complex topics on our minds, and then we send those topics as words, which is just a very low resolution of what the actual thing was. And that's the kind of problem that I have with people that say that like it's smart to say simple things, because like I agree with that, but then the problem with that and the paradox is that if you simplify things, then there's going to be a lot of loss of meaning and complexity. So it's just going to increase the probability that there's a misrepresentation of what you're saying, because it becomes a fractalized and fragmentalized into other people's minds and gives more space to misinterpretations, because you're compressing all the complexity of the information into a single like string of data. So it's kind of like the same thing here. You kind of have to create these abstractions, but then if you create the abstractions and you create black boxes in the way, then it becomes almost impossible to understand what's going on. So how do you solve that? That's the question. And ideally, you would be able to reduce everything into the same names and still be able to understand the overall structure. Because that way, it makes it a lot easier to learn everything. But you still need the names either way to write stuff, because it becomes almost impossible to like write everything with the same name and just understand how everything works. But that's a huge loss of energy, I think, that we have. Like you have to, because then you just increasing a lot more the data that you need to have on your hard drive, which is your body, of the stuff that you use to code things. Because then you have to remember a bunch of names, and if you could just compress all those names into a single like pattern, then it would leave a lot more space to understand how everything works, because everything is going to be the same thing, even different programming languages. It's just different frequencies of symbolic representation of state machines, I think. Maybe one thing that I can do is it's probably gonna fail, but I can try to use the VS Code debugger and try to step into this thing. Just see what happens, where I get segmentation faults. Oh. It's probably because of the type here. It has to be something like that. But this receives the camera, so maybe it's because I'm using the camera later. It has to be this call because when I removed, it worked, so. Uh, But I think that this is the type that it receives. It doesn't receive a pointer, it receives the actual thing. So I'm gonna try to loop over or go with the debugger. The way you set this up, which it wasn't very annoying for me to do, you just have to put these files here on VS Code, and there's stuff on the documentation that they tell you how to set up. So the launch JSON is the thing that is going to happen on the execution of your code, and the settings JSON. The settings JSON is the properties that you can set up on the CPP. But if you want to set up what's going to happen on the compilation time, then you have to create a tasks.json file inside of this .vs code folder, and then you specify what commands you want to run to compile the code before you execute. And then the launch JSON is going to be the part that executes the code, which is the command you put here. And I got this from the documentation. And then when you select the file, the file is going to be the target, and then you can run here. And then it's just going to call whatever function you have here. And if you have the task.json, it's going to call that to compile the code first before it runs. And also you can put, I think, if I remember, like a key here that specifies the commands that are going to run for each configuration of the launch that you want, that you put here. And then they have this environment variables. They specify the paths for each thing. But I guess this just replaces this command is just going to be the file name, I think. So if you run on main, it's going to be whatever the path to the target is, I think. It's just the program that is going to run. Then you can put arguments, which arguments you're going to put here, for example, s, v, that kind of stuff. Stop entry is to stop at the entry point of, or probably the main function. Gotta put false here. Environment, I don't understand very well, I think. And then the other stuff here is what debugger you want to use. And if you're using Windows, I installed everything with this package manager, which is Chocolate, and then it puts stuff on this path here. It puts the GDB. So, and if you want to find, which is also another thing that I just figured out recently, you can just type where and then the name of the executable on the command prompt. And then it tells you the paths that you have the executable on your computer. So I can do this and then put the path here. So I think the problem is the executable. It's the way that I did this CMake command. This is another annoying thing about libraries and CMake. That the way that CMake works, you have to add, every time you add executable here, you're just saying to CMake that what's the name of the file, the final file that is going to be the executable that you get as a result of compiling everything. And then after that, you put what CPP files are necessary to create the executable. Then after you do that, you have to specify the path to the header libraries that are going to happen on the linking process to create the final executable. So first, you create objects that are from the CPP, which is just another representation of the code. CPP, then the next step is to link all those object files, and the way that it does that is by connecting the function declarations with the definitions. So the declarations are on the header usually, and the definition is on the CPP file, and that's the linking process. So you have to specify where the header files are, and then the external libraries, which is kind of annoying as well. So here, which I don't understand fully how to do, but the way that I'm doing here is just adding subdirectory. So I put the source code of the Raylib on this folder here, and then just put this command on CMake, and what's gonna do is just find the CMake list for this project on this folder. Then you're just gonna run all the commands to build the external library, and then you have to use this command to link the external library with whatever executable you have here. Then here I'm including the directories, which is just the header files, And here the local source header files that I have, which are my own, not from the external libraries. And this stuff I got from the other project, which I think that's what it does is compiles the shaders. So you just get the shaders files and then adds a dependency to the executable. So it just links everything, I think. So what I think is happening here is that I'm trying to run the main CPP, but the CMake that I have builds the OpenGL on this path here. So for that reason, it doesn't work. So maybe this thing here. Maybe it was just a problem with this command. Not really sure based on the error that I was getting there. I don't understand why though, because maybe it's just and this is kind of another annoying thing. It's kind of confusing because you have multiple different compilers in C++. So depending which compiler you're using, you might get some mistakes or others. So maybe when I run from the debugger here, it runs with another compiler, and then it fails with the flags here. But when I run directly with the terminal, it works because the default generator that I'm using here has these flags here. And the generator is just whatever compiler you're going to use to create the executable. The default, if you're using Windows, is probably going to be the MS build, which is from Microsoft Visual Studio. And if you want to specify, then you just, I think is /g, I don't remember, and then you just put the name. So Unix makefiles, I think, is if you want to create a makefile in the build directory, which is the one that is specified here. And that's going to create a makefile, and then you can run the make. And that's probably going to work. You want to run the thing on Linux as well. Let me try again, now that I changed that stuff. Abio extra. Also, this command doesn't exist. Maybe it's like this. I'm gonna try like this, and then if it doesn't work, just remove. It is weird though that the terminal was working and now it's not working with this. Yeah, invalid arguments. Yeah, but I'm not using that one now. Oh, maybe it's because I have to delete this file. I have to delete the cache, maybe? The file, the cache, it, like the name says, it remembers the configuration you had the first time you created the builds. So there's, I think there's two step process. The first one creates the object files, and the other one creates the, it goes through the linking process and creates the final executable. But I'm not 100% sure if that's like the difference between the two, because I'm running two commands there every time. So I think that this one creates the object files in the beginning, and then when you run this one, it's from the object files links everything, like links the declaration of functions to the definition, and then it creates the final executable from that. I think, I'm not really sure. Hey, what's up? Not load cache. So maybe if I build, so maybe it's because I don't have the task JSON there, so it only runs if you have the configuration already. Maybe that's the problem. So when I delete the cache, it complains. I'm gonna try to build like this first, then run again, see what happens. It takes a lot of time. I think I'm just gonna go over the functions here to try to understand how they are calling OpenGL. I think the key here now is to understand how to, yeah, for the first thing that I have to understand is how to create the shaders on the files and then pass the data from the shaders to the OpenGL functions. Then after that, I can figure out if Raylib is gonna allow me to have flexibility to customize whatever data I want to pass. And I remember it's very annoying to do that, to specify the data, because it's like a giant matrix you have to put, and then I believe it's going to be from 0 to 1, but I'm not 100% sure. So it's going to be a matrix with a bunch of values, and depending on which values you pass, it represents, like, it's going to create the shape that you want, I think. And the thing is annoying is that, if I remember correctly, like the shader itself works kind of like a template. So it's kind of like putting water on a structure. I'm not really sure what's the best way to say in English. But the structure is going to shape the flow of the water. So the structure is the shader, and the water is the data. So you set up the structure once, and then you create different circles based on the data you pass. And I think that's the reason why it's kind of annoying. Because then for each ball you want to create, the data is going to change across the execution depending on how you want to move things on the visualization. And the way that you're going to set up the shader here, the calculation, is going to be on however you want to update the different data you're passing to the shader. Maybe I should try to incorporate this library here. Or probably they use the library already on Raylib, so maybe I can access functions from this. So probably the best way to do it is just using the functions from this library here, because this is a math library that handles the calculations for matrix multiplication and all this stuff, I think. So probably the best thing to do is to try to look into the source code to understand how everything works. I think it's the same problem. So I'm gonna remove this and then try again. Let's see here, but I'm not really sure why it's doing this. Because here I separated, so I don't understand very well. I'm just gonna remove this and then see if it works. I think it's one of those things of compilers that's the problem. So when I'm running here, it's using one compiler. When I run from the terminal, it uses another one. So it becomes, so there's a problem there. Let's receive segmentation fonts. Is receiving segmentation fonts before? Oh, so it might be because I don't really have this function. That would be weird. GF subobject. Hmm. So it might be in the initialization. Let's try this. And it's weird that I'm not getting this error once I comment this out. So like if the error is here, why when I comment, but maybe it's because I'm not using the camera anywhere else. So it doesn't matter that this like it's just it doesn't exist. What is Raylib and Raygui? Is a library. I believe that they allow multiple different languages, but it's just a I'm using on C++ now, and it's a library that allows you to draw stuff on the screen. So Raylib is just a bunch of functions based on this diagram here. This is how it works. So it's a bunch of functions that allow you to communicate with this other library that is called OpenGL. And this OpenGL library is going to communicate with the GPU, and the GPU is going to draw stuff on the screen. And then Raygui is a library that helps you build user interface components. Yeah, I think it is. Seems load, blah blah. I'm gonna put this message on ChatGPT. It's programmed to the GPU instead of the language or system, I guess. It's not really, it's more like an interface. OpenGL is the thing that is, OpenGL is the standard way that you can communicate with the GPU, as far as I understand. So like you can have multiple different GPUs structures, but then they all agreed to a standard of like an API, application program interface, which is just a collection of functions that allow you to determine how you can tell the GPU to do things, regardless of what's the architecture of the GPU. And then Raylib is built on top of OpenGL. So it uses OpenGL to render everything. So it's just another abstraction that makes it easier to build stuff, I think. Yeah, as far as I understand now, that's how it works. But I think that this code from ChatGPT is not correct. So maybe if I just do the same thing that it did there for the other one. I have to see here. So I'm just gonna ask how to initialize the struct. So I think I have to put zeros on everything. Or maybe I put a vector. I think it has to be the other way. Because you don't have to explicitly declare everything else. I think if you don't declare, it's just gonna be 0 by default, but probably this initialization is not correct. So maybe like this. PNGL is a software driver component of hardware graphics driver. Yes. I think the issue here is probably, yeah, this is the issue. It's not gonna give me, I think, the correct errors. Because when I debug, there's probably something which I'm still struggling a lot with, which is kind of annoying. The the biggest issue and the biggest challenge is using CMake to make the external libraries work. So I think that this is related to that, but I'm not really sure. So like when I'm running the debugger through the VS Code, it's gonna run these commands here. But then for some reason these commands they don't set up the external libraries well. Maybe. So maybe that's why I get segmentation fault in the beginning, but I'm not really sure. So I think for now I kind of have to try to guess. It's programmed in C. Yeah, in C. So anything that is written in C, it works in C++, I think. I probably gonna have to remove the. I think Raylib already has the GLFW library, so I can just use. I can just import, include Raylib, and then I already have access to the. So I'm just gonna have to study the source code, try to understand. Let's see. I guess I'm gonna ask how to initialize this stuff. Stern it? What do you mean? Like, what part here? Here? The problem here, extern, as far as I understand, just exposes the whatever you declare with extern to other to other files. So it's kind of like a way to create a global file. So it doesn't have necessarily to do with the library, because the way that I'm linking the library is with CMake. So this code here works, except this line here. So if I comment this line, then it shows this stuff. So I think the problem is the way that I'm initializing the camera here. So maybe I'm gonna comment, if it doesn't work, I'm gonna comment everything out, but you're gonna see that it's like showing something if I don't have this part here. So the problem is the way that I'm initializing the camera. Not sure off the top of my head where it goes. Now, do you understand how CMake works? I know a little bit, but I'm still learning. So obviously I'm probably making a lot of mistakes. So yeah, but now you see that shows like something here. Yeah, so the way that CMake works, yeah, so I can teach you. So at least as far as I know. So the way that it works is just like the way you compile code on C++ is just by using the command, the G++ or whatever compiler you use. Then you specify the C++ library, then you specify the outputs, which is going to be the executable. So that's if you have a simple file, but then obviously if you have more files and it gets more complex, then you're going to have to write you're going to have to write a very complex command here. So in order to solve that, people created a make file, and a make file allows you to write a bunch of instructions that are going to dictate where? Here? Which file? Yeah, here. Yeah, external. Yeah. So the way that this works is it includes the CMake from the other projects, the external libraries. Yeah. So you get it. So this is the path. I manually selected this. This is not from CMake. The external is just the name that I put. Yeah. And then the add subdirectory just runs the CMake code for this, whatever path you put here. So the CMake is just the creation of make files. It allows you to, it makes it easier to develop code that is cross-platform. So that it works both on Windows and Linux and Mac. So it's just it's kind of like and you use another language which they created here. So it's kind of like the pip on Python or npm on JavaScript, but you have to do everything manually because there isn't a standard for how to get everything. You probably still need extern C somewhere, but I don't think so. Yeah. The problem is not the. I'm very confident that's maybe I'm wrong, obviously, but I think that's not the problem. Because if that was the problem, then it wouldn't be working when I comment this line out. So I'm pretty sure that the problem is here, and it has to do with the way that I'm initializing this. But it might be. I'm not really sure. And maybe I have to extern here, but I don't think that would make sense. Because this, like this function call is on the same scope of this thing here, so. Let me see. Initialize struct like using vector, blah blah blah. I'm just gonna copy this stuff. And the thing is that ChatGPT recommends this function here, but I don't have access to this function, I think. So I think they changed the API. And I got this one from the other one, so that's probably the issue. Yeah. It is very, like, it's a pain in the ass in the beginning to learn, and I still don't know very well how to use it, but it seems to be the best thing to do, like, outside of, if you don't want to use Visual Studio. And I think that the downside of doing with Visual Studio is that you become dependent on the IDE, and I don't like that very much. I like to have an approach that I can just make it work with whatever, like, I have. So obviously you're still gonna be dependent on CMake, but it gives you more flexibility, I think. Yeah, what Visual Studio is doing is just using CMake under the hood, I think. So it's just an interface. Let me try to, because sometimes it gives these errors, but it's just delay. So I guess it's just this thing here. Remember that this was a problem on some other. And it probably is related to the compiler versions or something like that. Sub-object should be wrapped in braces. Position. So position. It's probably the first argument. Should be wrapped in braces. I don't understand though, because like, should I do like this? That wouldn't make a lot of sense. They have their own compiler, but they have been open sourcing and supporting cross-platform for less than 20 years. Yeah. I'm not really sure if you can set up different compilers with Visual Studio, but I assume you probably can. But I think that like, it's easier to set up with Visual Studio because they handle the stuff for you under the hood. But it's probably the same thing. It's just like setting up commands. You can also set up projects with batch files or PowerShell, ACH files, with shell files or batch files. Because they're just setting up a bunch of commands that are going to run on the terminal to compile everything. But obviously, it's a lot harder if you do that. Do is fire up VS and make a CMake project, then you can call CMake project from Visual Studio, since you still compile. I don't like that very much. I prefer to have the flexibility. Maybe some points I'm gonna do that, but for now I prefer, even if it's harder in the beginning, because I'm gonna get used to it eventually. I'd rather have the flexibility of being able to use whatever IDE I want. Oh, maybe that's why. Because it's already converting. Let me try to just do like this. But I don't think it's probably the way that I'm initializing here, but I'll look into this later, I think. What is the correct way to initialize everything? You do still, well, you do, it's still make, oh, it's not, don't worry. Something to look into in the future. Hmm. I'm probably just gonna continue to do like this. But who knows, maybe, like if it's too, but even if it's too annoying, I think it is still worth it to like just try to figure out solutions because I really don't like the idea of being trapped like by one single thing. Because then it's kind of like using straps on the gym. I use this analogy a lot because, and it's just a question of values and all this stuff. I get it. Like you do have benefits on using because then you waste less time in the beginning. But it's kind of like using straps on the gym. Like if you always use straps or gloves, and then like let's say you spend years doing that, then you become very strong. But then you can't lift without the gloves, and I really don't like that. I prefer to just like since the beginning just do like bare hand and then get used to because usually that pays off long term. Like short term is annoying, but then long term you get better. Yeah. Don't worry, man. I'm gonna try to compile, and then if it complains, though, try to ask ChatGPT again. Sometimes it's just from the extension. Yeah. Oh, now it works. Yeah, but I'm not using this stuff, so I have to comment this out, compile again. One thing that I'm gonna do whenever I don't wanna whenever I don't wanna talk to people, I think because there are some times where I don't wanna get distracted. I think I'm just gonna put on the description that I'm not reading things, and then whenever I put that, it means that I'm not gonna read messages. But if I don't put that, then it means that it's okay to talk. I think that's a like good way. Yeah, it compiled, but I didn't. I have to comment this out now to see because this is the line that was giving me an error. So if it doesn't work, I'm just gonna have to spend a bunch of time. It didn't work. There's something here. I have to spend a bunch of time looking into this. It's gonna be on on this thing here. Maybe I should try to put print statements or like break inside of the function and then try to see. So this is a question. This is the stuff that I was talking about that I saw in the video. Apparently you can use this print function. And then you can use like this and then you pass the value here. And I think this works for arrays based on the video I saw, but I don't know very well. But for printing structs, I'm not really sure. So I'm just gonna ask ChatGPT. I'm not really sure if they're using namespace to call stuff from the standard library. Just mention as you code, you read chat later, like others do. Yeah, but sometimes it's better to just like focus on what I'm doing. So it depends, obviously, because it depends on like the mood you're in and the stuff that you're trying to do. Like, sometimes it's just too distracting, I think. So, but a lot of time, other times is good. So, what do you, what you do is only acknowledge immediate chance, things that matter. Ignore the rest until you take a break. Yeah. It has to be the karma that's is the only explanation. It has to be the karma. It's the way. So I'm gonna ask ChatGPT if I how can I print the karma struct to the oh thanks. Extern, but what do you mean when you say that? Like you're like where exactly do you think I have to put? Like on here? I don't understand where you want me to put it. Or on the camera? It could be that, I'm not pretty sure. I think it isn't, but maybe it is. No, just tell me the line and the file. Maybe it's like I don't understand this message that they're giving. Initialization of a sub-object should be wrapped into braces. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. If you declare a C++ function to have C linkage, it can be called from a function compiled by the C compiler. Declare a C++ function to have a C linkage can be called from a function compiled by the C compiler. But isn't everything being compiled with the same compiler? Function declared to have C linkage can use all the features of C++, but its parameters and return type must be accessible from C. If you want to call it from C code. Use all the features of C++. You need to extend C in the interface to the Raylib. Time call Raylib, extern it. And the way to do that is just write extern before the whatever I do. Like extern here. It looks like it's not working here. Assumed. So I have to specify the. So I have to declare the functions using extern and then call them. That's what you're saying. I think this is void probably. You can do it in blocks also like a namespace extern C. So let's say I can do it here. You're telling me like to do like this. Or I can have a namespace. I think I understand what you're saying. So if I'm gonna use a C library, but I'm using a C++ compiler, I need to tell the compiler to extern. So that the C libraries have access to this stuff. Oh, so if I write like this, should be fine. I didn't know that. But do I have to declare, like, do I have to use everything? Like, how do I create the namespace? And then declare everything inside of here, and then just use Raylib to access, like, declare this stuff. I don't know if this is the correct way to declare. And then I just put Raylib here. Then it needs to be on functions that call the clib. So put it inside of here. Like this. So it's probably the error is that I'm using a function that doesn't exist. Yeah, like this. Start C. I don't know if that's the error though, because if that was the case, then why wouldn't the other functions be giving me an issue? That's the thing that I don't understand. It seems like it's only this function here, but it might be the thing that you just said, that this is the only one that is using C++ code. So because the library is on C, you have to specify to the C++ compiler to create the link between the two. The whole file can go in. So here, like this. And it seems like this one should work. Yeah, you can extend the functions themselves also, include as needed. Also, just Raylib, like here, like this. Expect the declaration. Also, like this. Include isn't C. Let's see. I think it's not the issue, but maybe it is. So it's complaining now that this. So maybe if I delete the extern. I'm gonna search on that. How do you figure out, how did you figure that out? So I can look into the resources to study this. It's still the same problem. C and oh, okay. I just want to see like if there is any like keywords that I can use to search. Because I never heard. I obviously saw the extern, but I never heard of this extern C on the videos that I watched. So the other thing that I want to figure out is where am I printing? I think it's one of the methods here. And this extern can be used. Extern C just blankets the whole thing. Okay. But it's still not working. Initialization of a sub-object should be wrapped in braces. Oh, maybe I have to put this on the heap. So allocate memory. Not sure if that makes sense. And then instead of doing like this, I should use this. Yeah, but I don't think that makes sense because of the type that this accepts. And this is the thing, because it can be some like weird thing about the compiler that I still don't understand very well. Like, sometimes I get these messages, but they are not like real messages. They are just like, I don't know. It's probably some stuff with the like the configuration. It's a Raylib wrapper. Then you see what it requires in the wrapper. What do you mean? And now it's not even showing anything. It's probably an error here. Maybe if I don't, let's see if I don't use the equal. It's probably not gonna work, but yeah, nothing. What if I put vector? But now there isn't, the message went away. And segmentation faults. It's not even loading. So maybe it is the stuff that you're saying, something related to external, but I don't understand very well. Uh, the best way probably is to just try to just gonna try a bunch of stuff. Just either the initialization or the stuff that you're saying about the declaration here or the is extern. But I don't know. Yeah, maybe it could be the function as well for some reason, but it should the function should work. That's the thing. So it's something when it's loading the thing. It's probably the initialization here. So what if I do? I remember that this. Oh, I think I know what to do because there's another project that I have on C that he initializes a struct. So I can remember how to do this. So maybe if I specify like here targets up, then review. Oh, it isn't right. The extern can get Raylib working is okay. I think they've avoided the extern keyword in the wrapper by lining all the functions as a wrapper does. Hmm. Foggy. Maybe now it work. What? Still fucking up. What? So let me see if I can find the like how should I specify this? Oh, it's probably because it's camera 3D. No, yeah, I'm using this the thing. Hmm. How do I include the file? I'm not sure if I understand. I don't know how to include the file. The only way that I know is by using the include here. I'm not sure if I understand what you mean. Like the way that it is here. This code here. And then remove this stuff here. If and def. No. Oh, it's on compilers, I think. Compilers beginning learning C. If and def. Oh, but it would, yeah, that would make sense. Include a file that includes Raylib wrapped in this extern C directive. Include a file that includes Raylib wrapped. Yeah, I'm not really sure. Is this the way you're talking about? And then includes, I do this here, then and if, and then include this file. Like this. And then I remove this stuff here, probably. Like this. Where does this thing go? Should I do this? But no, it's probably on the other line like this. The error is on the same line. I can't see the header you posted. There just some code that you posted, and then I put Ctrl C, Ctrl V. Maybe this. Or should I remove this thing here? That's half of the file. Hmm. Not really sure if that's the problem though. I think that the problem is it might be the problem though. But I'm thinking that it's probably some. But I'm not really sure if it makes sense to be the initialization. Because it looks like it is supposed to be working, so it might be the stuff that you're saying. Include Raylib H in a separate header wrapped in extern C. So like the same thing I was doing before. I don't remember if it's so here. I think this should be if and def as well. Then and if. You're saying it has to be inside of the parentheses. Or the curly braces. And then I would have to define inside. So it's probably because I don't have this file included on the CMake. Oh, but it should include everything that is on the include folder. So I'm not really sure, man. Is that how it's supposed to do? Yeah, I don't think that this is the... Maybe it is, but no. There is no paste bin on the chat that I'm reading. Yeah. No. Maybe if I go to the YouTube one. I'm looking at the chat from OBS. So in the chat that I'm looking, there isn't anything. Maybe it gets blocked because of the configurations. Yeah. It doesn't have anything here. Okay. Yeah, now I got it. So just copy this code here onto the extern lib. This one. Yeah. Also, it's on different line. Hmm. And then here I would include this file, obviously, not the other one. So I'm just wrapping the Raylib H on this stuff here, and I have to... But I'm pretty sure I downloaded the last version here, but maybe not. That doesn't even matter. No, I have a mini wrapper. Hmm. So this should make it so that the C functions from Raylib, so that I can use C++ outside of the Raylib to interact with the Raylib functions. I'm not really sure if that's the problem, but it's good to know that it's possible to do this. I think the problem that I'm getting there is probably different because I don't see, like, the other functions are working and I'm using the same stuff, but it might be useful for later, to know about this stuff. This one is probably because of the version, I think. This error I don't get also. Extern lib h 3112. It's one of our issues which will probably compile and run without it. Advanced compilers can tell C code now. Oh, okay. Good to know. Yeah, thanks for the help. Which one of these do you think is better to this one or the source codes? Because I'm pretty sure that I downloaded, maybe I downloaded the like another version that is not the latest, but obviously I can just replace there. If compile on Linux or anything you need it. Oh, okay. Good to know. Source, okay. You have to compile everything. Hmm. Yeah, I'm not really like it's not very clear to me how these things work. It's kind of hard to find information based on the videos I've watched. Like, this is stuff about the different compilers and different platforms. Like, how do I make sense of all of this stuff? And like, what is the best way to go about writing these things? Like, I think it's not very clear on my mind. Like on production code, when you're gonna like create something that obviously a bunch of people are gonna use, like what is the thought process when you're developing that? Like, should you develop on one specific compiler or should you try multiple different compilers? But then it gets very annoying because then you have to set up like the CMake and it's like all this stuff is very confusing. I think it's one of the most annoying parts of the of writing C++. So far, at least, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's also really hard. Once it scales, it probably is as well. But as far as now, this has been the most like pain in the ass to figure this all this like setup stuff. Yeah, DDL is also something I had a lot of issues with, and I still don't understand very well. I know that it looks like Windows looks for DDLs on or DLLs on some specific paths, and if you want to make it work, like the way that I figure out is just to put on the same folder of the when I was trying to use SDL3, but I still don't understand very well how to develop the DLLs and how to make it like how to allow it so I can put on any path that I want. Workshop Spree 2000. Streamers just grab the DL and use it. If we're making production code, blah blah. Should code cross-platform from the start. It's different on every operating system. It's in the name. Open Windows environment variables from start. Yeah, that part I understand, but it's just I know I understand how it works, like the instruction set architecture, and that is gonna be different for each operating system. But it's more about when it comes to the development of the thing. Like how do you structure different like should you always use the same compiler or use multiple and it's just very annoying at the beginning. Your own with registry keys. Hmm. I think I already have that, right? It's the same ID. I already have all of the, at least the ones that I'm using, the variables on the path of the compilers. Independent development environment. Took me 15 years. I know. There's a bunch of people that I've seen that is also like that. I saw there's this guy. It is like it's the best channel that I found so far, from my perspective. This Jason Turner. He also probably has a lot of experience. And there's one of his videos where he talks about everything you need to know to master, and it's just this list here. I was like, fuck, man. There's so much stuff to learn. Like, it's unbelievable. And that's just the C++ part. It's not even the CMake on the setting. Yeah, just the language. It's even more annoying. All the setup you have to do and all this stuff. Yeah, like there's an infinite amount of like knowledge, oceans and oceans, never ends. It's crazy. I think I'm just gonna delete the other one that I have there and then try to compile everything. Is this one? Oh, I have this one as well. But this is another. Oh, oh, I think So are you talking about a different library? Because I remember I downloaded this, which is a C++ wrapper for Raylib. If I remember. So maybe what you're saying is just like what they did on the library. Raylib CPP. I think it's the one that I have downloaded there. Yeah, this one. More languages, more standards, more noise setups, more patterns, more no single programmer knows everything, as far as I can tell. Probably like this. Yeah. Except AI. AI is gonna be like goat at everything. Who knows how long it's gonna take, but eventually probably. But I downloaded this library here as well. So not really sure if it's related to the stuff we were saying here. On to C sharp. I think Rust as well. Some people, but I'm not really sure if his Rust is good for like more graphics programming stuff. C sharp, I've seen people talk about, but also I've seen a lot of people complain about C sharp, so I'm not really sure about it. Uh, yeah, my concern with this, and this is kind of like the hard part on when you're beginning, like there's so much stuff to learn, and you don't know how the direction of things are gonna go. So it's very hard to decide like what should, because I also don't want to get into the trap of always jumping to the next thing. So it's very hard to find that balance. This is my biggest concern because then I move to C sharp, then I start doing that, then like someone else talks about another language, and there's like always new languages coming up and a bunch of like stuff, like endless stuff to learn. So for that reason, I think I'm gonna try to stuck with C++ a little bit, and then maybe I'll try Rust again or whatever. Yeah, it's fun. But it's fun as well. Like after you go through the challenges and you learn stuff, then it becomes fun. It's just the beginning that is very annoying. Unity, I'm playing with C sharp. Interesting. I'm probably not gonna do that. I'm gonna try to stick with C++. It might be better, but I think it's probably just worth it to stick with one thing. At least until I master, or I feel like, because the thing that I'm trying to develop is something that is gonna help me learn everything else. So what I'm trying to do is like create something that is gonna allow me to learn everything else faster. And if I can do that, then I can learn all the other programming languages at the same time. That's the idea. But I'm not really sure if I'm gonna be able. Because I already developed all this stuff on the front end. Then I moved on to Python, like to study a bunch of stuff on Python, and now I'm doing C++. So I don't want to like jump from one thing to the other. I want to see if I can like, and C++ seems to be a good, at least for now, because it is very hard. So it's gonna be annoying. So I'm gonna grow a lot, and it's fast and it's used for game development. So I think it's probably, at least initially, a very good choice. Once no strides X's, you want C sharp. What is stride? About stride. Hmm. Let's see if I try to compile this again. Really mixer. Now it seems that it is working. And still so it looks like there is a problem here. Cannot open source file Raylib. You won't need C++ though. Most new engines and code is C sharp, kind of like almost nobody uses now. Only C++. Because nobody uses C now, only C++. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. My concern is just the thing that I talked about, because especially with AI, like there's always gonna be a new thing. So it's very hard to decide. Since I don't have the experience, I don't know. Like C is used for low-level libs where speed and reliability are key. Also the interface firmware drivers, C++ for high-level drivers and low-level game engines. I'm gonna go to the bathroom real quick. Be right back. All right, I'm back. C++ can be used for that also, but it's through home. Is medium level drivers slow. Last time C++ was used to make an engine was 11 years ago or more. Interesting. So you think that for graph visualizations and like, do you think C Sharp is the same speed as C++? The thing that I'm not 100% sure, like I also thought about this as well, that like mainly I'm trying to create graph visualizations on 3 dimensions. But then it might be very useful to be able to create like textures and other stuff. Like it opens up a lot of possibilities, obviously, but I'm not really sure if I want to go like very complex on the game parts of things. It's more about the meaning of the visualization itself. So the only reason Unreal 5 is C++ is because with high graphics you need low-level control to tweak some maps. Yeah, so this is another thing that I'm not really sure. Because from the stuff that I'm thinking about doing, I probably need to get closer and closer to the hardware to have more control. So these are other things that attracts me. The way that I'm thinking about it is not in programming languages. It's just about state management or state machines, I think. That's the point that I want to get to. Is like be able to create a distinction of the algorithm and data and then view everything as like the same thing because essentially everything is the same. What changes is just the compilers, so the rules of the grammar. Strides, ramps, C++ in, it runs as fast as the engine. I started with the fastest engine ever built. And the engine, the thing that I'm trying to do is with implementing Barnes huts. Do you know Barnes huts visualization? Or I want to implement Barnes huts on 3D so I can have the same like physics simulation of this. So I'm not really sure if that classifies as an engine or not. State machines are old concepts with object-oriented programming. There are better partners than state machines. No, the way that I'm thinking about it is I want to build something that highlights the distinction between what's fundamental and what's superficial. So I can parse code and learn the patterns faster. That's pretty much the goal. So create a visualization that allows me to see the patterns and learn everything faster. And the way you do that is by highlighting what's fundamental and what's superficial. Generic functions, graphics implements, same thing. Yeah, but this is what I don't know, like, because I do think that is gonna be different, right? So the game engine is gonna implement physics simulation, I think, and the Barnes huts another type of physics simulation. So I'm wondering, like, C++ and Vulkan. The thing that I like don't like very much about Vulkan is that I think it is closed source, unless I'm mistaken. So even though OpenGL is older, I think that because it's open source, it's probably like more reliable for me. Not really sure if I would like to rely on Vulkan, but from what I've seen, Vulkan seems to be the best option. It's more complex and it's better, it's faster. But I don't like that it's closed source because then it's kind of like a black box set of generic functions here. All that in C#, they're both open source by the same people. Vulkan is just hard as fuck. Is it really though? Let me open the. I downloaded Vulkan on this thing here, and the project that I was seeing uses Vulkan as well. That's why I have the environment the flag variable on the CMake thing here. Because I got this from the other projects. I prefer usually this. For me, that it makes like it's kind of like anything in life. What's hard in the present is gonna pay off long term. So I usually prefer things that are harder now, because then obviously forces you to skill up. So coding an engine for the past 6 months, still not working in Vulkan. Damn. Yeah, that's the downside. You lose a lot of time. That's the problem. So there's always a trade-off between the two. But I think that probably is not worth it because of the reasons you said. Like it's just gonna take too much time. Because the idea that I have is to use the stuff that I built to learn faster. So if I can't do that, then it kind of becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy, like a recursive self-improvement. So I can bootstrap everything else based on this, and then it makes everything else easier. Like, that's kind of the idea. Not really sure if it's worth it to invest a bunch of time. Also, it's probably better to try to make stuff with the easier version first, get used to the OpenGL Raylib, then think about like once I have more experience of OpenGL, you write your own buffers. If you go with Vulkan, you write your own OpenGL. Yeah, so probably it's a good idea to try OpenGL first, then once I'm good, maybe I'll think about Vulkan. Do you know any keywords that I can search for, or any way that I can search on how to clarify the connection between the shaders and the libraries, like Raylib and obviously OpenGL is going to be the bridge. Like you pass as far as I understand, you pass the shader to OpenGL, and then OpenGL handles the GPU stuff. But like, how can I clarify? Yeah, I understand that as well. As far as I know, JL, SL is just a language that you're gonna write the shaders. When I'm talking more about, do you? I think it's just as simple as loading the shaders, and then you just pass the shaders to the functions on Raylib, and then it does everything for you. Yeah, OpenGL shader language. Hmm. Yeah, basically. Yeah. It's not that hard. Uh, so, like, what is usually the way that people structure things? They write the shader files, then they load the files based on some function that is provided by the library, and then they pass this struct to another function from the library, and then the library manages the OpenGL stuff and like the buffers from OpenGL, and then that uh, makes the GPU draw stuff. Is that usually the way that you're supposed to do it? How do you find the optimal distribution? Like, do you write one shader to create the whole graph, for example? Or would you write one shader for each sphere and one shader for each line? How do you know what's the best, like the trade-offs and stuff like that? I think that the intuition that I have is correct. One shader for each effect, yeah. So the only thing that I'm gonna have to get better at is just figuring out, like clarifying the calculations of the matrix to update everything, and then the how to set up the matrices for the data. The script, that's how our scripting is done. Modular, separate, small, simple. But I do think that there is a gradient that's going to depend on the circumstance. So, like in general, obviously, but then is a question of the frequency and the size. And that's going to depend on the circumstance, I think. So if you do a single function for every single thing, then I think it's too much. You're creating too many abstractions. But then if you just do one like giant function, then it's not much. Then obviously the gradient is going to be dependent on the context. Sounded like yeah, yeah. I think yeah. Should not have never have more than one action. Hmm. I'm not sure about that, but you have more experience, but maybe. If you have a copy function, you should copy nothing more. Hmm. It becomes easier to test, right? If you do like that. But I do think that it depends a lot on the what you're doing. It's gonna depend on the circumstance, I think. Yeah. That's how NASA codes. I already opened this. It's easier to test and functions can fail. If you write a simple single function, it can be repeated without fail. There is a balance though. I don't believe that you should do like a function for every single thing always. I think it has nuance, so it depends on the context. Use error checking and pointer exception should know if it fails. Hmm. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like it depends. Single thing for every function. Functions can be complex, but they should only have one objective. Yeah. I think I agree with that. It's hard to define though. Like, how do you define what is an objective is? You should not define it. I know, but it's always gonna be subjective to some degree. And I think that's where like the personal preferences are gonna come in. Because it's just like everything else. Like gets in certain domains, you're gonna be like it's always gonna be a gradient between subjectivity and objectivity. I think it is to some degree. Because I think reality works this way. Like based on I think physics is philosophy. So you can never know for sure if anything you know is true or not. Because it always happens after the fact. So I think that's experience is more fundamental than abstraction. Yeah, I think it's a gradient though. So it generates gravitational force. So the things that don't change frequently are more objective. So the standards make more sense, and I think that on that sense is correct. But then at the limit of variance, then you're gonna have a lot of differences, and it's gonna depend on the subjective experience of each person. And that's where personal preferences are gonna come, I think. And then there's always gonna be like discussion between the different people. I think it is because how do you know physics? I think it's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Like how do you know you are always connected with the experiment. So how do you know that the probabilities you have about things happening is correct or not? Like your assumptions are already embedded into the system based on your personal experience. I think all truths are lies to a certain extent. I think the notion of truths and lies is just a gradient of density. Is like the more solid something is, the more truthful it seems to be. But it doesn't. You can't make it 100% proof because it depends on the relative experience of the observer. In my mind, what makes something a law is just the frequency of computation of an observer. It's how much on space time it seems that the thing is stable in relationship to their experience. But how do you know what thousands of years are? Like you're assuming the past and the future already. Like it's embedded on your experience. I don't think that time is linear. I don't think that we go from the past to the future. I think the present creates the past and the future simultaneously. So how do you explain why there's something rather than nothing? Hmm. And that's the kind of the paradox then, like because like probabilities and experimentation is dependent on the paradigm of time. Time is the perception of our entropy. Yeah, I think I agree with that. Yeah, I don't know. It breaks my mind to think about this stuff as well. I also think that's is correct. We live in a relative universe. The arrow of time doesn't go backwards because there is no time, only the speed of entropy. Yeah, I also agree with that. Arrow of time doesn't go. The only time machines that will ever exist are black holes. Yeah, I also agree. They don't go backwards, they slow down. So what do you think is the singularity of the black hole? But if you think like that, why do you think that physics is 100% real? Like, doesn't that imply that it's kind of paradoxical because you can't really know for sure? Because there is physics and science is already assuming that it's already assuming time based on experimentation. Dark matter is created inside of black holes. I don't even understand what dark matter is. Mixes atomic particles, destroys them, creates elements that don't exist. Calculated mass of the universe. I'm not really sure. I don't understand enough, so I don't know. But based on intuition, I don't think that the paradigm today is gonna hold forever. So I think there's a bunch of stuff that we are missing. I think that, but the thing is that I don't understand very well, like the quantum mechanics arguments and the differences between many worlds and string theory and stuff like that. But I do think that my model is that consciousness is fundamental, and then space-time is a data structure. So the closest you can get under the lens of abstraction to the truth is with paradoxes. I think paradoxes are the edge, the boundary of abstraction. So it's creating the rest of the periodic table inside black holes, creating super dense materials. Hmm. It's not possible for us. Magnets stop your hand stabbing your grandfather. I'm not really sure if I understand that. Not sure if I understand the question. Entropy's loss going back in time isn't something that is possible. That entropy's loss going back in time isn't something that is possible. I think it is, but it depends on what do you mean by going back in time. Because I think what defines the present is the experience of not going back in time. That makes sense. So when you go back in time, it's just like the only way to go back in time is to forget everything about the present. So like if you went back in time and you remember what's like to be in this present, then you wouldn't really be going back to time, be going back in time. You would just be in another past, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think that paradox is the edge of abstraction. Because the only way for us to be here right now is if we, at some level of reality, is eternal. Otherwise, it would have ended already. That's what I think. So the only way for the present to exist is if eternity is part of reality at some point. The universe doesn't think, it works on physics. So you're not a part of the universe? Yeah, I think it works on cycles. So death is birth. Because all relative polarities collapse into the paradox. Because the paradox is the limitation of the boundaries. So the boundaries are mutafractal, and that's the structure of geometry, which is just the structure of space-time. It's like a computational frequency of awareness that creates the illusion of separation between things. Thing works like pockets, and those pockets can only expand so far. For the physics that controls it collapses. Hmm. Do I have an empty bottle? And remove the air. Bottle reclaims itself. Recoil all the way to the lip. Not really sure though. What do you mean by recoil all the way? It, I don't know this obviously, but isn't it possible to have a bottle that has vacuum inside? I'm pretty sure that it is possible to have, because that's how they achieve zero gravity in some places. I'm not really sure though. Oh yeah, implosion, but that would be because of pressure, right? Not from pressure like a bottle. The universe expands and dies. It will require from lack of structure, not from pressure like a bottle normally. I don't think that's like it's I don't know obviously, but I think that the problem here is that I don't think you can have an objective experience if you don't have subjective experience. So I think that this observer and what's being observed is the same thing. So I think when you die, the universe ceases to exist, but not really because it always there. So your perspective is just a hologram. So you are eternally entangled with what you experience because what you experience is a part of yourself. So I don't believe in the heat death of the universe. I think when you die, the universe stops, but then it begins again, and it's like endless, is eternal. So the laws of physics is just a projection of awareness. But who is we, and how can you see? Because seeing is just measuring, right? You're just sending photons, just hitting stuff. It's like the like tracing on here. Like you send a projection, then you interact with the particle, and then you gather information on the external variables that you make assumptions from to determine what the thing that you're seeing is. From sure. The never exploding universe makes no sense. You can see the particles. That's not a hologram. It's capture. It have to be a hallucination. Yeah, I don't know. Whatever. Uh, I do think that reality is imagination. Like what creates experience is the distinction between the two. So they are the same thing. They're different gradients of the same thing. And one just seems more real than the other because of entropy. But like you said, entropy is just relative. So like the imagination seems less real because it seems like the substrate for our imagination is reality. So the reality has higher impact. But I think that they are entangled, and the perception that one is more important than the other is just a relative experience of the observer. And I do think that it has to be eternal at some point because it wouldn't make sense. Like I think the answer for the question why there's something rather than nothing is because something is nothing. Is the only way to make sense. I think the assumption is wrong. And the assumption has the embedded perception of time, the linear time. Like there was nothing and now there's something. So that assumes that time is going from past to future. But I think it's probably not accurate. I think that they're both the same thing. And what gives the illusion of time is the perception of the observer over the how the distinctions are changing. That creates the time. The dreamscape is just an obvious clue that is very real. Escape is what you're describing. I never heard of dreamscape. Like, you mean lucid dreaming? Yeah, dreams. Yeah. hallucinations. Yeah, it seems unlikely that. I think a lot of people talk about this, that the correlation between truth and survival is 100%. So like, it makes more sense that we didn't evolve to see the true nature. We evolved for genetic fitness. So it seems more likely that the perception we have over reality is not exactly how reality operates, like on the bottom layer, let's say. Non-physical reality. Yeah. Well, that's why I mean that obviously I think that it makes sense to rely on physics and to use physics to do stuff, obviously, because it seems that it works. But I don't think that is 100% correct. Like you should always be aware of the assumptions you're making when you're using the system, and all systems are gonna have assumptions. So it's not never 100% that is correct. It's always a probability, I think. No physics exists. Everyone can get hung up on quantum physics. That's double slit. Not Markov physics. It's a game shark of reality. Quantum is going to be crazy. To me, that's intuitive. Yeah. It is really difficult though to think about this kind of stuff because like you have the like kind of the fear of losing your mind because it is really crazy to think about all this stuff. I mean the probability. I am. And I think a lot of other people are because it's like it's very similar to religion and other stuff. Like if you knew for sure that there was a meaning to life and like if you knew that what's gonna happen after you die, and if you knew what the meaning of life is, if there is a meaning, you would change fundamentally the way you do everything. So the things that people believe to be true, like their religion, fundamentally changes the way that they interact with reality, like 100%. So, and to me, that's what it goes down to. That's the whole thing about alignment and artificial intelligence and all of that. Like what you think is going to happen after you die and the overall game that you're playing on reality changes everything about your the way you see everything. That's why it matters. It's not because it's going to make it more effective to measure things, but it can help answer why are you doing the measurements in the first place. But I think that's not achievable with abstraction. Is what people call about the enlightenment, like the your mind can't get to that point. You have to transcend that through the being. So under the lens of abstraction, you're always going to be trapped by dualities. And I think that the highest approximation you can get is paradox because it's the boundary of abstraction. I'm not really sure. So it seems like it is working. So it has to be this function here that is incorrect. I think I'm gonna stop here. I already spent a bunch of time today. I've probably been streaming for several different hours. So yeah, probably gonna continue to do this next time. Try to make this work. I think off stream we're just gonna continue to study C++. Probably follow these steps here and watch a bunch of videos. And the next time that I stream, I'm gonna continue to try to solve this issue here. Or maybe I'll just do. I think probably off stream I'm gonna watch videos about uh, how to create 3D visualizations with Raylib, and if I can't find, then I'm gonna look into OpenGL and then try to understand based on the source code how Raylib interacts with OpenGL, so I can. The first step is to try to create something like a 3D visualization with Raylib, and then after that, I can start to try to create the GUI. Yeah, but first I'm gonna focus on trying to create the 3D visualization. And yeah, if you're still there, man, it was nice talking to you, and see you next time.